Tensions continue to escalate with Iran following Trump's unilateral decision to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. Now, I just want to remind you that the current president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, was certainly a more moderate president, certainly after Ahmadinejad, who was more far to the right, and his language was more inflammatory toward the United States. Now, in this case, after Trump has pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal and has implemented these sanctions, which are crushing Iran, well, Rouhani has decided, I'm not gonna play nice anymore. He gave a speech, and in that speech, he unveiled a new weapon. President Hassan Rouhani unveiled the Bavar 373, a long-range surface-to-air missile system that he described as an improvement to the Russian S-300. I don't know what any of these weapons are, it just sounds bad. And of course, doing this speech and unveiling this weapon is to send a message to the United States. And by the way, I want to be abundantly clear, the aggressors here, the United States. The United States decided to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal, even though Iran was following along with the nuclear deal. And even after Trump pulled out of it, they continue to follow the guidelines under that deal. But then Trump decided to implement these sanctions. And at that point, Iran is left with no choice. And by the way, Rouhani said the following: now that our enemies do not accept logic, we cannot respond with logic.
Yeah, unfortunately that's true. Look, Iran's leaders are not democratic. Do they oppress the people of Iran? Yes. Have they been at times wildly, horribly wrong? Yes. But the way that they are portrayed by the right wing and the media in this country is by definition irrational. At one point, Tucker Carlson said they need to be annihilated because they don't understand logic. Hilarious, hilarious. No, they're regular human beings and making rational decisions. And that deal with Iran that we did was one of the best deals I've seen in American history, where we removed all of the uranium, including the ones that they were using for energy. They didn't even have a weapons program at that point. Now Trump gives them every incentive to start a weapons program, because basically threatening war and giving them no incentives for following along with a deal that we broke. So unfortunately, Rouhani is not wrong when he says, well, what am I supposed to do? I guess I'm gonna start building missiles, and in case America and the West attacks. By the way, here's how you can tell if we're right or wrong. Go look at our European allies. And it's not just European allies, it's the Russians, it's the Chinese. This is the one thing that the Chinese, the Russians, and Europe agree to. They're like, America's wrong, Iran is largely right about this peace deal. And nobody wants Iran empowered. We don't want them to have those weapons, but all of our allies are saying, it's America, you broke the deal for no reason and left them no choice.
And they were all part of that deal. So all of those countries, it was a 6-country deal. So they basically unilaterally, Trump, pulled out of a 6-country deal. And I also wanted to point out something about the coverage that drives me nuts all the time. NBC News here says, Western military analyst says Iran often exaggerates its weapons capabilities. I'm sure that's true. Rouhani's a politician. He's trying to impress his own people. And then it goes on to say, though concerns about its long-range ballistic missile program contributed to Washington last year leaving the pact, that's completely not true. They're reporting as fact the propaganda of the Trump administration, which is, they're tampering. They absolutely, as you said, adhered to the deal. So this business of reporting as fact, Trump's spin on breaking a deal, again, it's as you said, Iran, it does some terrible things to its people, but this kind of reporting just drives me crazy.
You make such a great point, and there's an interesting disconnect because NBC Nightly News just recently did a report in Iran that was fantastic. And we're about to show you a snippet of it. But yeah, it's very different from the print reports that I've seen coming from NBC. Now, one of my favorite figures from Iran, because he's just so incredibly candid when he does these interviews, is the foreign minister. His name is Javad Zarif. And he gets asked a tough question here, and just pay close attention to how he answers.
Zarif told us there was nothing more to talk about, but the Trump administration says there is plenty, including Iran's threats towards Israel.
It accuses Iran of leading the world in terms of
a state sponsor of terror, assisting Hezbollah, Hamas, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, fueling sectarian violence in Iraq, fomenting civil wars in Yemen and Syria. And to all that, you say what?
First of all, the nuclear deal that we have was negotiated in the context of our regional disputes. Number two, who's the source of instability in the region? Who supported Saddam Hussein when he invaded Iraq? Who supported the Taliban when they took over in Afghanistan in the 90s? The answer to all these questions would not be Iran. The answer would be US allies.
Well, that's 100% true. And there's a wrong premise in Lester Holt's question, and I understand he's quoting Trump, so it's not Lester Holt's fault. But first of all, I don't know if you know this, but we invaded Iraq. It caused tremendous instability in the world, let alone the Middle East. But also, when Iraq invaded Iran back in the day, we supported Saddam Hussein. When Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons against Iran, we supported Saddam Hussein in using those chemical weapons. We supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and Reagan had them over at the White House, and they later turned into the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The wrong premise is including Taliban and Al-Qaeda in the groups that Iran supports. Iran hates Al-Qaeda and does not support the Taliban. On the other hand, they do support Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. So if you at least be accurate in what you say, and has Hezbollah and Hamas done terrorism in the past? Yes. So it's a mixed bag. There's no black and white issue there. You're perfectly within your rights, and we're all within our rights to be mad at Iran for supporting Hezbollah and Hamas. That's also an overall complicated question. But if you're gonna be mad at them, makes sense. You should also be mad at us for creating much greater instability in the region.
And that's not even counting the support we're giving to Saudi Arabia, which is probably the world's biggest exporter of terrorism and has been for quite a long time. And we continue to support them. We continue to support their brand of extremism, their antagonism, not just with Iran, but with Qatar and some of the other countries in the area. So I have to say, he has a point. He has a point.
Right, and in the very beginning of his statement, I think he said something that's really important, right? Which is, look, we negotiated the Iran nuclear deal with all these regional disputes in mind. So if you're genuinely concerned about these conflicts, Trump, pulling out of that nuclear deal was a bad idea.
And look, one last thing, you get a really one-sided look at all of this if you watch American media. And so they say, oh, well, you're supporting these actions against Israel. And there's truth in that. And so that's perfectly fine and good to point that out, because I want Americans to know the good and the bad that Iran does. On the other hand, there's excellent and credible reporting that Israel is the government that was behind assassinations of scientists in Iran, physicists, etc. Some that were working on weapons programs, and others that weren't even working on weapons programs. They're top scientists in the country. One of them was assassinated in front of his kids as they were picking up their kids from the kindergarten. And so, it's hard to tell for sure that was Israel, but the best reporting that we have says that it was likely that it was that government. I mean, can you imagine if Iran sent assassins into this country and murdered our top scientists in front of their kids? We would have already declared war, invaded, and the whole Middle East would be on fire. But you almost never hear that in the press in America, because they're not actually giving you all the facts, they're only giving you one side of the story. The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.